reason why we are here in this room right now is collectively, all of us from different backgrounds and experiences. Each of us have different roads, different pathways have led us to this point. But what is collectively true, it is because you have beckoned us. It is because each and every one of us have heard, we know what it is to hear the voice of Christ beckon our name. And we, by your grace, have chosen to respond to it. Jesus, I pray that you would fill us with your joy. Let your joy in us be complete. Jesus, I am praying that by the end of this talk, by the end of this word, this proclamation, that we, your people, would be filled with joy, overflowing, able to withstand all and any trial. Jesus, I pray that the words that come from my mouth would only be the words that are proceeding from your lips. And I pray that no more and no less would be said from me. And I do pray, Father, that you would individually translate what I am saying to each person present here. I pray, Lord, that each person here would receive the word from the Lord that they need in order to endure and persevere and continue on the journey, the road you have up for them. Let your kingdom come, Father. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. As I was praying for each and every one of you guys here tonight and asking the Lord what is it that he wanted to do and accomplish, it was very clear to me, at least what was impressed upon my heart, was it's like I want them to know that I am glad to be with them. Like he is glad to be with you. He's glad to be with you. And I believe what he's going to do, what he's going to accomplish in this time is reconnect us with that gladness that fuels us and encourages us on the road ahead. Because the Father is glad to be with you. I'm not quite sure when I started believing this. I'm not quite sure when I first began to wrestle with this thought, and it I think sometimes negatively impact like my actions and my dialogue with the Father and how I responded to him in faith. I'm not sure if what I'm referring to came from maybe a teaching that I heard from the pulpit, or if maybe it's something that we actually all wrestle with, or maybe all have believed or believe at one point or believe currently. But it's this thought that sacrifice apart from joy is sufficient and even applauded by God. So again, sacrifice separate from joy is applauded by God. I think when this concept or theory, this thought first was collided with was in college. And I was on this spring break mission trip. It was my freshman year. I was on this spring break mission trip with about 500 college students, right? So, and we're on a mission trip. We're building houses, or not building houses full on, I'm not building any house, but we're serving people, right? We're serving people, we're sharing the gospel, we're helping people fix up things. Talk about sacrifice. That's sacrifice. I could have been anywhere else on spring break, freshman year of college, but I'm here serving with about 500 other college students on this mission trip to the valley. And I remember it was maybe just the second day of this trip, standing in this large auditorium that we were renting out, and I'm in the back of it, and a song is playing, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if it was that song of where we just recently sung, where it's like, fill me, set a fire within me. Like, you provide the altar and I'll provide the sacrifice. That was actually my jam freshman year of college. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if my arms are not stretched out, raised, and that's the song that I'm singing. Or maybe it's that, worthy, you are worthy of it all. That's another jam. So maybe I'm in the back of this auditorium and my arms are stretched out and raised before the Lord. Full allegiance is being given to him. God, you can have it all. When a young girl comes up and approaches me and she proceeds to tell me, I really feel like I've got this word for you. So I let her begin to speak, and in an instant, walls that were still up and within my heart were shattered. In an instant, this word that this young girl awkwardly, shakingly was giving me, that came, she said, from the Lord, caused me to be so undone that places within me where there were once cobwebs and where junk, once filled this area of the home within inside of my heart, all of a sudden now that area too is being filled by the presence of God, this Emmanuel presence of God. And I think in that moment is when I first realized, yes, I was undone by the reality of what was taking place in that moment. How the Lord was unseating and removing years of baggage that was stored up within me. This broken-hearted girl, he was restoring that place that I may worship him, yes, even more fully and wholeheartedly, sacrifice more, yes. But then on the other side of that, I was further in reflection, and even when I reflect back upon that time now, today, I am further undone about what that moment spoke about my King, what that moment spoke about this person, Jesus. See, it speaks right there in that moment. He was reminding me yet again, even as my arms were outstretched before him, you are worthy of it all. And surely that's enough for him already. I'm on a spring break mission trip. I'm sacrificing. I could be on South Padre Island right now, but you are worthy of it all. But even in that moment, he wanted to create a display that would show me, hey, I am with you. I see you. I don't know if you know this, and actually there's some things there that wrestle up against, even in your sacrifice. I want you to know that I see you. And not even just in this very moment, right now, but I'm speaking to the moments of the past to let you know that I was in those past moments as well too. Right now in this moment, I am Emmanuel, God with you, the Savior of the world, the Creator of heaven and earth, choosing to be with you, to be in your junk, to be in your mess, to be in your situation right now. But then also too, I was with you when you didn't even know it, all those years before, working out the plan and working things out for you for in these moments and the moments to come. So in that moment, I realized, okay, he must care. It must be much more than just sacrifice to him. The Lord he is opening, he is after our joy in the fellowship with him. For us to be wholehearted before him, surrendering and rejoiciously worshiping him, or that being the thing that anchors us, or no matter what we face. When the scriptures, particularly Hebrews, reflect on Jesus' sacrifice. It says, I'm going to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. Yes. And it says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, and I think we may have it, but it's okay if we don't. But it says when Jesus, this is Hebrews reflecting upon the sacrifice of Jesus. It says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I find it really interesting that, I've seen Hebrews chapter 11. We're probably all familiar here in this room. You just have, spiritual giant after spiritual giant is listed. You've got your Moses and Rahab and all these incredible people, Abraham, all these incredible people that are regarded as being people of faith. And so you have the Hall of Faith chapter. And then Hebrews chapter 12, continuing on from that, gives us the ultimate model that we have, and that being in Jesus. And when giving a recount on Jesus and his grand display that we should look after and model, don't you find it interesting that it says that it would mention for the joy set before him, he endured the cross? That would be worth mentioning and instinctively, intentionally highlighting as the reason he did what he did. Because I don't know for you, but for me, I think sometimes we treat joy as like a dessert. Like, in my home growing up, I love dessert, right? All of us do, unless, you're those great people out there that can really curb your appetite and do a really great job of, you're like, no, I don't like sugar. I like dessert. But growing up, we didn't always have dessert. Could be for several reasons. Maybe one of them was just, hey, financially we cannot do dessert right now. We got your bare necessities. We got your things that you need to survive on. We got your protein, your carbs, all those things, your grains, your veggies. That is present. I can provide for you that, but there's no extra in the budget right now for dessert. Or maybe it's just a matter of my mom didn't have time to make something, because store-bought desserts wasn't really a thing in our house. So it's like if we were having dessert, it was something that she's made herself. And so maybe it was just a matter of she was too tired. Didn't have enough time. But we had our meal. And so the meal, so this joy being the dessert, and then the meal, the necessity being, oh yeah, for sure, that's, faith, obedience, trust. Those are some crucial things that we need. That's the necessity. Joy, it's if we can have that too, if it's possible, it's great. If we can have that, yeah, let's also add that down at the dinner table. So I find it really interesting that for Jesus, when recounting Jesus' sacrifice, it says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Despising its shame. I always wondered what that word, despising its shame. It's literally saying he counted it as worthless. The shame, because you got the cross. That was one thing he had to encounter and experience. The physical agony and abuse and trial of the cross itself. But then on a whole other level, you've also got the shame of the cross. That it was literally meant to be this public display, this mockery. You were on display, people were on display witnessing this gruesome death. And he says he's despising its shame. Literally counting it as not worth something to be avoided, but worth enduring. It was worthless, the shame. But this couldn't have meant that worthless in the sense of that it really didn't bear, that he really didn't have to bear under it, that it really didn't create any pressure for him. Because we remember the Garden of Gethsemane. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is there in angst, knowing and seeing before his eyes, seeing where this is headed, seeing where the road he is on, the pathway of obedience. If he continues to follow in his Father's footsteps, doing what he sees his Father doing, like he sees him leaded towards the cross. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's wrestling to the point of shedding blood because it is agonizing, because the pressure is weighty. But then yet here, endured the cross, scorning its shame. So what was this joy set before him that would cause him to endure the cross and scorn its shame? Yeah, this is agonizing, but in comparison with this, it's worthless. It is nothing. It's nothing that I should try to avoid. It's nothing that I should try and tiptoe around, see if there's another method. It is worth enduring. It is worth going through because of this joy. It says here that, and has sat down at the right hand of God, at the right hand of the throne of God. The joy for Jesus. Yeah, I love where it says in the NLT, where it says, and now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. The joy for Jesus that he saw on the other side of this experience of the cross was to be restored in fullness of glory and reunited with the Father. That was his joy, to be back at the right hand of God. Joy for Jesus was relationship, was complete restoration of the relationship that him and the Father have shared since the beginning of time. It is relationship with the Father that fueled the journey. That's his joy. So in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, when James begins to talk about how are we going to encounter and get through our challenges, he says, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. The joy here that James is referencing is seen later on in verse 12, where it says, blessed is a man who perseveres under trial. For once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. The joy that James is referring to here is for us, that we will one day receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. This joy that overflows is present because of this expectant hope that we have of the future, this crown of life that we will receive one day. But I'd also say that present here in this verse is also a testimony and a truth, an anchored truth, that our joy isn't just for what is coming. Like Jesus' joy was for what was coming, what was being restored him back before the Father, seated with the Father, and one day us to join him. But for us, it is not just the present reality that we will encounter in, but it is also, because of Jesus, the current reality that we experience. In verse 12, that word blessed. Blessed is the man who perseveres. When I was reading this, I was like, this is so good. This is so awesome. That word blessed, it's the same word for blessed. There's like two different words that have been used throughout the Bible for the word blessed. And this one right here is the same word that Mary used when she was talking about that the people of old, when they reflect upon her, they're going to recount her as blessed. For her, she was referencing this indwelling presence, being filled with Christ and fully satisfied. And James, for us, using the same word here, blessed, if I was to rewrite this verse, I'd probably say filled with the Emmanuel presence and fully satisfied is the one who bears up under the pressure of pain, the pressure of depression, the pressure of anxiety, the pressure of fear, the pressure of a broken heart, the pressure of loss, the pressure of grief, divorce, fully satisfied, filled with the indwelling presence of Christ, fully satisfied is our claim to fame, our great inheritance, even now, right now, at this very appointed moment in time. We have not just a joy yet coming because of what will be provided to us when we finish this race, but we also have the joy that we can tap into right now because of the reality that we are filled with the indwelling presence of Christ and fully satisfied. And so when we meet trials, when we meet pain, depression, agony, spiritual forces working up against our ministry, we encounter them not alone, but we encounter them as one bringing the presence of Christ into that moment, bringing the presence of Christ into that situation. I love how in James 1 verse 2 where it says, some translations will say, when you meet various trials. Because it's the cool thing is it's not just us standing face to face with a trial. We don't stand alone before it, but we stand there facing it with the God of the universe filled up within inside of us, fully active within inside of us. The book of James is really practical. He does in this book, it's really intentional for the believers that we're encountering various trials of their own. Issues, debates between those that were poor and those who were rich, and spiritual conflicts and social conflicts. Persecution for them was not so much just persecution in the sense of martyrdom, but it was probably more so actually what we could say we encounter maybe today, where it's just for them, it's maybe they weren't getting the business or they were having a harder time because of their faith. So James is really practical. His intention is to move the believer towards action? What does this actually look, what does this faith look like actually lived out? It's in James where we have the faith without works is dead, right? Because he's trying to be like, what is this, how do we actually, now that we've received this truth, now that we have the present reality, this concept, this truth that when I encounter a trial, I encounter it with the presence of God. That when I encounter a situation that I would maybe much rather avoid, but I'm facing it head on. I'm actually walking through it because of this reality of what I have access to. James' goal is to make it practical. Now what do we do? So that's why he says, count it all joy. Count it all joy. To count it all joy or consider it all joy, that's not a philosophical statement. That's not a good idea, he's saying here. It's not a whimsical notion, something to grasp after. Just be joyful. Pretty sure we've all encountered those situations where maybe we're really struggling. Maybe we are really battling anxiety or depression. Maybe we are seeming like, it seems like in a marriage or in a friendship or in your ministry, like you're constantly coming up against the same battles over and over again, the same walls. When James says, consider it all joy, that's actually a command, and it's an active one. He's saying to carefully, deliberately judge the it. Carefully and deliberately judge the it. Weigh it. What is this trial? And I actually invite you in this moment right now as I stand before you, begin having, I just, Lord, I thank you for your Holy Spirit is right now, even now, revealing the it's in the room to your people. That the dialogue with you and it can begin now. Because he's inviting us in to weigh it. I wonder if Jesus had a conversation with the cross. If Jesus had a conversation with the shame that he was going to endure. I mean, we know there was agony there. We know he was hard pressed. We know it weighed heavily on him. But then we also know that he chose to endure the cross. But I wonder if before choosing that, because of this joy that was set before him, if he actually had this conversation, maybe in one of those moments when he slipped away for prayer in isolation by himself, maybe he was weighing it. Maybe he was recounting what he was going to lose or encounter in persevering through this cross. Maybe he listed it one by one. This. Peter's going to deny me. I really love Peter. He's going to pretend like he's never even met me before. I spent 3 years with this man. He's going to pretend like he never even met me before. I'm going to experience the utmost rejection. Some people are going to throw accusations at me. As I'm hanging there on the cross, they're going to begin to misunderstand the situation. I don't know about you, but I hate being misunderstood. While I'm up there on the cross, they're going to say things like, save yourself. Show us, you're the king. Do one of those miracles that we've done before. Deliver yourself. Some people are going to spit in my face. That's never quite pleasant. I mean, let's not even take for granted just the physical pain his body was going to go through and encounter with every whipping, with every beating. What was going to happen to him, what that was going to feel like and experience. And I know he knew what he counted. He counted. He understood what was up ahead for him. But I wonder if then on the other side of that, in that conversation, one of those moments pulled away with the Father, if he presented before the Father this list, and then also it's like, but Father, but Father. And maybe him and the Father together began to list out what all would be inherited to him on this side, what all would be given to him in this enduring perseverance. Maybe on that list he saw the enemy confused and shaken as he went down and grabbed the keys of hell in the grave. Maybe he saw the enemy bewildered and he laughed. Maybe he saw being restored up in heaven in full glory and seeing his Father so pleased with him. Maybe he saw that moment that a young girl be standing in an auditorium, in the back of the auditorium with her hands raised, worshiping him. And then he'd be able to see that moment where he was able to access her heart and to restore what trauma or pain or heartache tried to rob from her. Maybe he saw your faces. Maybe he saw all of our faces and began to list out what could be and what would be. And in that moment, with those two lists beside each other, considering this, judging, that word literally meaning to rule over, to judge over, he was perceiving both things as a judge in a courtroom, perceiving both arguments being brought towards him. Here's the reason why you should run far away from this, why you should avoid this cross. But here's the reason why you should endure it, why you should look at the shame that will come upon you and despise it. Consider it worthless and nothing. So for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He made that choice. And James here for us, he is encouraging us. It is not less noble. It's not less faithful or shameful to look and present before the Father. What are your present issues? What are your present trials? What are the present things that are weighing heavily against you? What is it that you are bearing up under the pressure of? Because to consider it joy, to not just have access, because it's not just about access, to not just have access to the joy, right? But to actually tap into it, to activate it, that requires intentionality. If I gave you the keys to my home, I don't have one. If I gave you the keys to my home, and you never opened to unlock the door, you kept it locked, you've got access. But to actually experience the comfort of that place, experience the shelter of that place, experience what it means to be given this home, there's intentionality. So we are encouraged that we have actually a responsibility not to just try and hop on over to joy. Jesus is not, sometimes we here in the Western world, like we're just like, just get over it. Just get over it. Get on over the joy. And I think sometimes we take that same voice and we think that that's what the Father's saying. We're thinking that it's more, that that's actually what he's requiring of us, is just get over it. Just choose joy. Just choose it and get over it. But I actually think it is more honoring to the Father It is more honoring to the work of Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross for us and gave us access to. It is more honoring actually to consider it. To consider what all you have to presently endure or futurely anticipate enduring, and to weigh that up against the reality that he is with you. And not just the reality that he is with you, but that he has infilled you. And not just that reality, but that he is glad to be with you. And to unfold and to unpack intentionally, what all does that mean for this side of the list? So I believe that Jesus wants to give us permission tonight to make that list, to intentionally wrestle through what is present before you, where you currently struggle to experience the joy of the Lord. I love that verse. It's Nehemiah 8:10, where it says, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." I used to think of that verse and think, oh, okay, it's the joy God's giving me. But it's even more than that. That verse can also be read, the pleasure of God. The pleasure of the Lord is your strength. His pleasure, your strength. His joy, your strength. So I believe in the situation that we experience ourselves, whatever you are encountering right now in this moment, would you shift from a monologue in your head about that, to a dialogue that involves the indwelling presence of Christ, that involves him speaking into it, that involves not just you meeting it and encountering it, but him meeting it and encountering it with you. And therefore, as you work that out, as you wrestle through it, then you can consider it joy. Then you can get to the other side, or some translation, considering it all joy, that your joy being complete, that is complete joy.